Well, David, we're back again, and it is a really special occasion because we are both editors for Zondervan of a Word Biblical series. Now, the difference between us is that you have to edit like 900-page books, and I get to edit like 90-page books.
This one out.
But this is kind of cool. This is a momentous occasion because the Word Biblical franchise is just legendary.
Absolutely.
And it's just a classic. I think about like filmmakers and they talk about like their inspirations in Alfred Hitchcock or whatever. I think about like when I'm running commentary, the legends of my youth are like Jimmy Dunn
Yeah.
and Gordon Fee. I mean, Gordon didn't write for this, but the Word Biblical scholars, Donald Hagner,
Yeah.
just
F.F.
absolute.
Bruce.
Yeah, Lincoln, Andrew Lincoln. They're just legends. They're just these commentaries just they can't be replaced. You can try as you may to create new great scholarship, but these are historic works that have stood the test of time. I still go back to F.F. Bruce's work
I do. Yeah.
in Word Biblical and other series. I go back to it because it's just stood the test of time. So I'd love to just spend like 10-15 minutes reminiscing here and talking about just what a wonderful series this is and a little bit about the new series. So can you tell me, take us back in the time machine. What are your very first memories of the Word Biblical
Oh,
Commentary
wow.
series,
Wow.
WBC?
Yeah, I'd have to go back a long way to do that because, these commentaries came about, some of them in the 80s,
Yeah.
1980,
Yeah.
and some of them in the early 90s, and then some of them in the early 2000s. And I remember several, one by F.F.
Yeah.
Bruce, the first and second Thessalonians, and his
Yes.
his students, Seyun Kim, has
Uh-huh.
done a recent update. When these get to be about 35 years old, we're redoing them. That's part
Yep.
of the
Yep.
strategy of it all. But I mean, they were written so beautifully, so clearly. There's good scholarship there.
Yeah.
It still is probably, I'm here at the Lanier Theological Library, and we have all kinds of commentary sets. This is still the series that is pulled off the shelf and used more than any other series. I mean, even though some of these commentaries are 30, 35 years old. But I had such great admiration for F.F. Bruce, Ralph Martin, for example. Uh, there's just a variety of, like some of the people you mentioned, Jimmy Dunn on Romans. I mean, it's a fabulous.
Yeah.
I was writing my dissertation. I just worked through that thing, worked in that thing. It was very helpful, and I've keep going back to it because it's just a classic. And like you said, it won't be replaced. What about you? What about your earliest memories?
That's
They
a
don't
good
go back as
question.
far as mine, so
Yeah, probably Romans. I mean
yeah,
that's a pretty significant volume. I think it was one of the only ones that was more than one volume. It was two volumes, right?
yeah,
I always have to remember that when I'm doing the bibliographic information that it's two volumes. I
volume
think
two.
Revelation was also multiple volumes. Um, uh, Jimmy just had a knack for all the areas of study. He wasn't quite the linguistic expert that other people were, but I think that's okay. He really shined, I think, in exposition.
Yes.
One thing I love about the Word Biblical series. Okay, let me gripe just a tiny bit. I don't get into form critical stuff. I just don't.
Okay.
So that
No.
early section on form critical, it makes a little bit more sense maybe in the Gospels, some of the Old Testament books. But for Paul, I don't get into form critical stuff that much.
Hmm.
So that part I tended to skip. I do like text criticism, and I get into that. Verse by verse was great. It was great when I was learning Greek to have a resource that got deep into the Greek. I remember
Yes.
Don Hagner doing a lot of stuff with the Greek as well. But I think the part I go back to a lot is the exposition, the kind of summaries at the end of each section. I don't know what they're called, but
Right.
um, the brief explanations. Because whenever I'm dealing with a book and I'm trying to just get the gist of a section,
Mm.
I love those summaries. I just think they're just um,
They're
succinct.
well they're well written, and they're like
Yeah.
succinct. They get right at it, right?
And
What?
the introductions are fantastic. They're
Yeah.
thorough, they're beefy. Tell me this though, David. I'm not quite jealous. I don't think I'm jealous that you became the editor because you're senior in your career. But how did that happen? Did you just get an email one day, or was it like a lottery, or did you bribe
Well,
somebody? How did you
I
become
won
the
the
editor
lottery. Yeah, I'm a
of
very lucky
WBC New
guy.
Testament?
I won the lottery one day. I'm a very lucky guy. No, the person before me who was the editor was Peter Davids.
That's
And
right.
Peter's a good friend, and his stint as the editor didn't last a long time, and they didn't produce a lot of volumes during that time. But he was the one. He was taking up a new post in as a Catholic priest,
Hmm.
and he was moving to another place and just didn't feel like he had the time to really invest in this, because when you work with a commentary series like this, it takes time both to get authors to sign on to the project. That's
Yeah, yeah,
because in some cases, like, a 900-page book on First and Second Thessalonians, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. And that's a decade-long project in many cases. So that part, and then receiving the text and writing and responding back and forth, it's a long, long process. So he didn't feel like he had time to do it anymore. I was at a place in my own career that I felt like that I would have the
yeah,
time, and I had enough freedom within the workload that I did have to be able to say, yeah, I would love to do this. I'd love to work with these writers. I love the series. It's been so influential to me. I probably have every New Testament. I don't have all the Old Testament, but I probably
yeah,
have
yeah,
all the New Testament ones in my library at home, and I just continually refer to
yeah.
them. So I wanted to be associated with it, and so when Katya Kovret asked me to be the new editor, I said,
It's a
"Let
big
me think
deal.
about that for about 2 minutes." When I did, no, it's actually about 2 weeks. And then I talked to my wife about it, felt like, gosh, this is the right thing. I felt like, God was in it. And so I wanted to say, yeah, let's move ahead with it. And we've got a lot of great volumes that are under construction right now. Steve Wall
Yeah.
is,
I saw Steve posting about it that
yeah,
it's the first volume at least is at a good place to be ready for publication in the fall.
yeah,
Tell me this last question on this. I can't even imagine what it would be like to get in your inbox a manuscript of, 800, 900 pages, six, seven, 800, 900. How do you tackle
yeah,
reading through and editing?
yeah,
Do you do it in stages? Do you do it all at once? I mean, how do you even
yeah.
approach something of
Well,
that magnitude?
yeah, well, Siyun Kim, whose volume is out last year, 1 and 2 Thessalonians, second edition.
Yeah.
This is the first one that I had a chance to work on, and it came about during COVID, and that
Hmm.
that brought with it a whole set of kind of different issues. Our library was not closed during COVID, so we were still working and still receiving patrons and such. Uh, but things in the publishing industry sort of slowed down. Let me just
Yes.
during that period.
Yes.
You're very much aware of that. So I read, and then for a while you got to put it down, and then you got to come back to it. So I had a rhythm that I kind of developed, and there were times that this book is big, but it's not as big as it would have been if we hadn't
And
cut
you
some
had to,
out.
that's part of the editor's job.
Yeah, yeah, that's part of the bane of being an editor. You've got to say, look, I don't think this part really adds as
Yeah.
much to it. I think it sort of takes a different direction. So you take that back to the author, and he was living in Germany at the time. He couldn't get out of Germany because he was it was
Wow.
COVID. So we ended up being a bit late on this project, and probably a year later than I would have liked.
Sure.
It
Sure.
just it just takes a time to do that kind of project. So you have to do it in stages. I
Yeah.
think you have to say that, and you have to do it. My job as an editor is not necessarily to do all the commas and the
Yeah. No, no.
semicolons and
There's
that kind
people,
of stuff.
Zondervan has people for that.
They have people that do that. It's just to kind of look at the big picture.
Yeah.
What's happening? Is the bibliography sound? Is it too beefy? Because one of the things I love about these commentaries is that every section and every chapter and uh, every section, I should probably say, has a fairly significant bibliography.
Yeah.
and does that represent well the field, right?
Sure.
And uh, we've actually slimmed down the bibliography in these editions because we didn't feel like that it was being used
Yeah,
as
utilized. And there are other resources out there that can give you some of that. People can search things better.
they
Um,
can than 30 years ago. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, David, you and I chatted before we started that not a lot of people know that the Word Biblical Commentary created a secondary series called Word Biblical Themes.
right,
And
right.
you're not, it sounds like you weren't familiar with that
I'm not
series.
terribly familiar with it. I mean, I knew the commentaries, but I didn't
Yeah.
know. I remember seeing a few of the volumes, but it
Yeah.
didn't. They were kind of thin, right?
Yeah. 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 I have some
Do you have
somewhere
some of
around
those
here.
there? They were kind of thin, and they didn't. I just never gravitated to them, right?
They were these, kind of, I'm going to say kind of ugly. Ugly grayish. I
Yeah,
mean, probably in the
yeah,
roaring 80s, it was fine. But they
yeah,
had the Word Biblical lines,
yeah.
which is kind of cool, but they did a little bit something different. Now, my experience with this is um, I was in seminary at Gordon Conwell. This is the early 2000s, and I was doing a paper on maybe Philippians, and I just typed in a search engine, Philippians themes, because I was interested in thinking about the themes. And sure enough, this series pops
Oh,
up, Word Biblical Themes. They're really short books. And I go to the library, and at that time they had those nice library hardcovers. And I thought, oh, if they have themes for this, surely they have themes for the whole series. And then I would love to get these books. And they didn't. I think they had planned to do a full slate. I don't know how many full volumes the Word Biblical Commentary would have if it was complete. Would it be like 60 some?
wouldn't be quite that many. Gosh, well, just looking at 1 and 2 Thessalonians, it's 45.
Oh, 45.
I
Okay,
think
so
we're
50
coming
some.
in the low 50s, like 52, something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I imagine they had expected to do 50 some and they only did 15. So they only
Mm.
did a handful of New Testament, and then some of the Old Testament ones in the 80s, I think, and maybe early 90s, and then they just stopped. I
Right.
wonder if there was it just fell between the cracks and editors maybe passed away. And you and I know that the Word Biblical imprint or series changed publishers a
Right.
few times.
Yes. Yes.
So kind of an interesting story. Handful of years ago, well into my career now, I wanted to do some work on some themes, and I did another search just like I did, in 2002 or whatever it was, and there wasn't a volume on that book.
Mm.
And so I just reached out to our mutual friend Katya, and I said, "Hey, what if we redo the entire thing just from scratch? Let's just do it all over again." And that was a handful of years ago, and she said yes. She said this is a great idea. It's a great idea for a series. There isn't really anything else like this out there. And
Mm.
so much fun. We contracted the thing so fast because people just were dying to get involved with this. Short books published by Zondervan under the Word Biblical franchise. So it's called New Word Biblical Themes. People have wondered what's the difference between the commentaries. So there's huge difference with the commentaries. The commentaries are these huge, beefy, verse by verse, technical, academic, Greek oriented or Hebrew oriented, into the minutia. And the Word Biblical Themes is the opposite. This is the 30,000-foot view. It's not verse by verse. It's by 3 to 5 topical themes. So, for example, for my Galatians volume, um, I only chose 3 themes. You could choose 3 to 5. I was minimalistic because they wanted my volume to be first. So I really wanted to do it to give
Yeah.
other people a sense. So my themes are family, faith, and freedom. Like a good preacher, David, I wanted to choose the
Very
same letter.
alliterative. Very
Yeah,
alliterative.
alliterative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
I do have an appendix on justification, but for those of you, I think we're going to show the video for this. For those of you that are looking at the video, I love the covers. And David, I think you'll like this because when I was asked by Zondervan what I wanted for the cover, I said I wanted it to look something like the Word Biblical Commentary with the green and black.
Hmm.
And I want there to be lines, but I want it to be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they went for these quarter circles. I think it's just beautiful. Don't you want to
I
collect
love it.
these?
I love it. I love it.
Don't
I
you
mean,
want to collect these
I'm gonna
volumes?
get them all. I'm gonna get them all. I mean, I really am, and I'll make sure our library has a here as well. But it's a beautiful cover, and
Beautiful
it really
cover. They
it's an echo,
It's an echo.
to
You
the
got it.
echo of this, right?
It's an echo.
But
Yeah.
it's a beautiful cover. It's a great idea, and I'm glad you're working at it. The only thing wrong with the series is I'm not writing. That's the
Uh-oh,
only
you
thing.
never know what happens. You never know what'll happen in the future.
You never know. You never know. No, it's a great
Yeah.
idea. It's a
Well, what's
great idea.
funny
But
is one funny thing about the series, David, and this is the opposite of your experience with Word Biblical Commentary is, I know for big commentaries sometimes it takes people decades, whereas this one we got half a dozen manuscripts right away within a couple of years.
wow.
And so we actually have to find a way to get them all into publication. Very different than your experience where you're saying, this person's 9 years past due.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
person is 15 years past due, whatever it is. So
yeah.
I'm thrilled about this because super cheap and affordable. Zondervan always does a great job. So my volume's $20, but you can get a discount just about anywhere.
Mm.
Super short. So when I think about a pastor going through a series on preaching series on Galatians or on Philippians or on Gospel of John. Patrick Schreiner, our mutual
Oh yeah.
friend, has done Matthew, and I just sent him my comments. Took me about 2 months to get him
Is it
comments.
really?
Very
Okay.
different than your experience probably with Professor Kim. Um, but the nice thing is you could put this as a text for your pastoral team to read
Hmm.
as you prepare a preaching series through Galatians or whatever New Testament book you want to do. So,
Yeah,
um, and I don't know, David. Last thing, do you have do you have the socks?
I do have the socks.
Okay,
I do
okay.
have
For
the
those
socks.
listening and watching, I'm not wearing them right now. I should be wearing them.
I should be
I
wearing them,
know
but I'm
for
not.
inspiration. I
Yeah.
would say almost every time I preach, I wear my word biblical theme Zondervan green and black socks. If it's the Old Testament, I'll do the blue. But if it's New Testament, I'll do the green. I might figure out if we can, reissue those socks now that
I
the
think those
new
socks need
word
to come
biblical
back. I
themes.
looked for them last year at the Zondervan booth at Society of Biblical Literature. Didn't have them, or
Yeah.
they, or at least they didn't give any to me. And
No, they're kind of a secret product. It's kind of like a secret menu at like In-N-Out Burger where you kind of have to, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, know the right people to ask.
right, yeah,
So we need to do some joint. We need to do a collab here and make sure we get merch out there. So, well, our time is
let's
up,
do it.
and for those listening, definitely look into the newer Word Biblical Commentary volumes like Seung Kim's First, Second Thessalonians, which builds off of F. Bruce's work, and then we are hotly anticipating Steve Walton, who I consider the leading Acts scholar in the world.
He is.
His forthcoming sounds like 2 volumes
It'll be three.
of
It'll
three
be three
volumes, but we're only
volumes.
getting one. We're only getting one this
Only
year.
getting one. I
It's
mean,
like Lord of the Rings.
you got to wait. You got to wait for the
Yeah.
what happens next before the fellowship fully develops.
Yeah,
Right.
just like Acts ends kind of on a cliffhanger, what's going to happen? So these volumes they have to build some suspense.
Yeah. He's
And
well into finishing up that second volume though. So
don't jinx him, David.
okay,
Don't
yeah, that's
jinx,
right. Ooh, I'll take that
don't
back.
jinx him. Don't
Yeah.
jinx him. We need him healthy.
Edit that.
Send him vitamins, whatever it takes, so we can get those volumes faster. And then for those listeners, I'll give you a little teaser. My Galatians volume is coming out April 2024. Next up will be David Garland on Second Corinthians.
Oh, wonderful.
He's fantastic. He wrote just a banger of a commentary on Second Corinthians, and then Dorothy Lee on the Gospel of John.
Mhm.
Fantastic Johannine scholar, wonderful writer, really spectacular, winsome pastoral theological writer who knows her stuff on Gospel of John. So a lot of great things happening over at Zondervan. We probably owe them a dinner since they've done so much for us.
They usually buy me dinner, but yeah,
We need
you're
to get
right.
Katya. We need to go in together on a really good Christmas present for Katya. How's that
Okay.
sound?
Yeah, okay. I think I
All
have
right.
something in mind.
All right. Thank you, David,
Hey,
and
it's good seeing you,
congratulations on the
Jay.
success of Where Biblical Commentary.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And good luck with your launch coming up.
Thanks.